My name is Cassie Miller, and at 29 years old, I never imagined my career would end in a crowded restaurant with my boss screaming worthless and incompetent at me. The sound of his voice echoed across the marble floors, bouncing off the polished wine glasses and making every diner turn to watch. Some tried to look away, but most stared, eyes wide, as if I was some spectacle to be pitied. I froze, my cheeks burning, my stomach twisting. My team sat in stunned silence around the long mahogany table. These were colleagues I had spent late nights with, working toward impossible deadlines, building the product that was supposed to define our company's future. And yet here I was, being executed in front of them like a scapegoat. So why was I fired? Or at least, why did my boss say he was firing me? According to him, I had cost the company millions by making critical errors in the product rollout. He shouted that I was careless, irresponsible, and that I had misled the entire team. But here's the truth. None of that was true. The mistake he pinned on me was his own, and I knew it. Let me back up. I grew up in a small town in Michigan. My parents were factory workers, and I was the first in my family to go to college. From the age of 12, I was fascinated by computers. I wasn't good at sports, I wasn't popular, but give me an old secondhand laptop and I could lose myself for hours. By high school, I was coding small apps for fun. By college, I was obsessed with cybersecurity. I wanted to build systems that could protect ordinary people from digital threats they didn't even know existed. After graduating with honors, I landed a job at a mid-sized software company in Chicago. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. 2 years in, I got an offer from a growing tech firm called Apex Systems. They promised innovation, fast growth, and the chance to lead real projects. It was everything I had dreamed of. And for a while, it was perfect. I worked under Jonathan Blake, the CEO. He was polished, sharp, with that perfect mix of charm and intimidation that made people lean in when he spoke. He liked to call himself a visionary. At first, I admired him, but it didn't take long to see the cracks. The turning point was the project we called Sentinel, a new adaptive cybersecurity system. It was my idea, a way to combine behavioral analysis with real-time threat detection. I had been sketching the concept since grad school, and when I finally presented it at Apex, Jonathan's eyes lit up. "This could put us on the map," he said. And that was the moment I should have been cautious. When I left that restaurant, clutching Maxwell Grant's business card like it was the last piece of hope I had, the cold Chicago night air hit me hard. My legs felt like lead as I walked toward the curb, pretending I had everything under control. Inside, though, I was falling apart. I opened my rideshare app, but my hands shook so badly I could barely type. My chest felt heavy, my throat tight, and all I wanted was to disappear. Around me, people walked past laughing, heading to bars and theaters, unaware that my career had just imploded in front of 50 strangers and half my team. As the car pulled up, I caught my reflection in the tinted window. Mascara streaked down my cheeks, and I hated how weak I looked. But the humiliation wasn't what hurt the most. What really crushed me was knowing Jonathan's lies would stick. He had power, influence, and a polished tongue. I was just the employee he had chosen to discard. On the ride home, my phone buzzed with notifications. Colleagues had already texted. "Cass, what the hell just happened? I know you didn't mess up the system. This isn't right. Are you okay?" But I couldn't bring myself to reply. Not yet. The truth was, I wasn't okay. When I got back to my apartment, a tiny one-bedroom with a perpetually dripping faucet, I kicked off my heels and collapsed on the couch. I stared at Maxwell's card on the coffee table, reading the embossed letters again and again. Grant Ventures. I knew the name. Everyone in the tech world did. Maxwell Grant wasn't just another investor. He was one of the most respected venture capitalists in the industry. If he was serious, this could be life-changing. But was he serious? Or had it just been a passing gesture from a man who pitied me in that moment? My brain spun with doubt. I barely slept that night. At 2 a.m., I sat at my desk, opening my laptop and searching his name. Article after article confirmed what I already knew. He had built his reputation on spotting overlooked talent. CEOs, innovators and founders credited him with giving them their start when no one else would. He wasn't a man who wasted words. Still, I couldn't shake the voice in my head whispering, "What if he regrets offering you that chance? What if you walk into his office tomorrow and he changes his mind?" By 6 a.m., I finally gave up on sleep. I showered, straightened my hair, and stared at my closet for far too long. What do you wear when meeting a man who could change your entire future? After several changes, I settled on a charcoal gray suit, simple and professional. If nothing else, I could at least look like I belonged in his office. The walk to the subway felt surreal. Commuters rushed past me with their coffees, heading to offices I no longer had. My badge for Apex still hung on my keychain. Useless now. Every step felt heavier as reality sank in. I was unemployed, accused of incompetence, and one email away from being blacklisted in the industry if Jonathan decided to push it. At 8:55 a.m., I arrived at Grant Ventures. The building towered over the financial district, all glass and steel, a monument to power. My stomach knotted as I stepped inside. The lobby gleamed with marble floors, minimalist art, and a massive digital display tracking global market trends. I felt completely out of place. "Appointment?" the receptionist asked without looking up. "Cassie Miller." 9 o'clock with Mr. Grant. She glanced at her screen, then back at me with a subtle shift in expression. "He's expecting you." "Please wait here. His assistant will bring you up." I sat in one of the sleek leather chairs, knees bouncing nervously. Every second stretched. Finally, a tall woman in a navy dress appeared. "Miss Miller?" "I'm Hannah, Mr. Grant's assistant. This way, please." We rode the elevator in silence. My heart hammered as the doors opened onto the 40th floor. The office was nothing like Apex. No cluttered cubicles, no frantic energy. Everything was calm, intentional, efficient. Hannah led me to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Maxwell Grant stood by the glass, hands clasped behind his back. In daylight, he looked exactly as I remembered. Silver hair, sharp features, a presence that commanded respect without him saying a word. "Miss Miller," he said, turning toward me with a small nod. "Thank you for coming." I swallowed hard and managed to respond. "Thank you for inviting me." "Sit, please." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. I sat, trying to still my trembling hands. Maxwell leaned forward slightly. "Last night was quite a scene." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "It wasn't true," I blurted. "What Jonathan said. About Sentinel, about me. None of it was true." His eyes narrowed slightly, not in doubt, but in focus. "Tell me what really happened." So I did. I explained how Sentinel had been my concept, how I had worked late nights perfecting the system, how the glitch came from Jonathan's decision to cut corners. I told him about the conference he excluded me from, the times he took my words as his own, the way recognition always seemed just out of reach. Maxwell listened without interrupting. When I finished, the silence stretched. Finally, he spoke. "Incompetent people don't create adaptive security systems. And incompetent people don't survive humiliation with dignity, the way you did last night. You are not incompetent, Miss Miller. You're simply in the wrong place." Something in my chest cracked open, a mix of relief and disbelief. But before I could respond, he leaned back and added, "Of course, there are risks. Apex will not let you go quietly. If you choose to work with me, you'll be challenged legally and professionally. But if you're willing to fight, I believe you can build something far greater than what Jonathan tried to steal." His words left me speechless. That was the moment I realized. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning. For months, I lived and breathed Sentinel. I worked nights, weekends, testing every line of code. My colleagues knew it was my brainchild. But as the launch date approached, Jonathan's behavior shifted. Suddenly, he was giving presentations to investors, using my slides, My words, without once mentioning me. When I raised it, he brushed me off. Don't worry, Cassie, the recognition will come. Then came the mistake. During the demo with a potential client, there was a glitch. The system lagged for 20 seconds, not because of my code, but because Jonathan had insisted on running an outdated server configuration to save costs. The client still signed with us, but Jonathan was furious that the presentation hadn't been flawless. From that moment, I knew he was looking for someone to blame. And blame me he did. That night at the restaurant, he made sure everyone knew who the supposed culprit was. He slammed his wine glass down, stood, and announced, "We will no longer tolerate incompetence. Cassie Miller, you're done here." Effective immediately. My heart sank. He wasn't just firing me. He was destroying my reputation in front of clients, colleagues, and strangers. The room was silent, except for the clinking of cutlery from a nearby table. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, my dignity crumbling with every passing second. I managed to whisper, "That's not true." But Jonathan ignored me. His voice grew louder, booming. "This company deserves better than your failures." And then, the unexpected happened. From the table beside us, a man I hadn't noticed before stood up. Silver hair, tailored navy suit, the kind of quiet confidence that made people turn their heads. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a card, and handed it to me directly, ignoring Jonathan. "Incompetent people don't create what you did," he said firmly. His voice carried, calm but commanding. "Maxwell Grant, Grant Ventures. My office, 9 a.m. We start tomorrow." I blinked, stunned, staring at the embossed lettering on the card. The room had shifted, all eyes now darting between Jonathan, me, and this stranger who had just flipped the entire narrative. What I didn't realize then was that this humiliating night was not my ending. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Walking out of Maxwell Grant's office that morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. His words replayed in my mind as I stepped into the elevator. "You're simply in the wrong place." But with the hope came fear. Jonathan wasn't the kind of man to let things go quietly. He had power, money, and a reputation to protect. If I joined Grant Ventures, I knew he'd come after me. Still, I also knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't crawl to another mid-sized firm, begging for a job while rumors of my incompetence spread. My only option was forward. The next day, I officially started at Grant Ventures. Hannah, Maxwell's assistant, gave me a tour of the offices. The atmosphere was unlike anything I had experienced at Apex. There were no frantic managers breathing down necks, no whispered politics in the hallways. The workspace was open, modern, with glass walls and collaborative stations. "This is where you'll be working," Hannah said, leading me into a large room with 6 desks, screens, and equipment I had only dreamed of having access to. "Your team will be joining you shortly." "My team?" I asked, blinking. At Apex, I had always worked under Jonathan, isolated unless he needed results. Hannah smiled. "Mr. Grant doesn't hire people to bury them under managers. You'll lead development here. He handpicked candidates for you." Minutes later, they arrived. First was Rachel, a cryptography specialist with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. Then Marcus, who had an easy smile and deep expertise in neural networks. Daria, a penetration tester with an accent I couldn't place. And James, a recent grad whose energy practically buzzed through the room. Last came Jessica, a systems architect who carried herself with quiet confidence. "Mr. Grant told us you're the brains behind Sentinel," Jessica said as we shook hands. "We're here to help you build it better." For a second, I just stood there, stunned. At Apex, credit was a weapon. Here, it was being handed to me openly. That first day, we gathered around the whiteboard, and for the first time, I explained my vision without fear of interruption. I walked them through adaptive protocols, behavioral authentication, and contextual threat assessment. Unlike at Apex, no one cut me off. No one claimed the ideas as theirs. Instead, they asked questions, suggested refinements, and pushed the concept forward. It was exhilarating, but reality wasn't far behind. That evening, when I finally returned to my apartment, an email was waiting for me. The subject line read, "Termination and confidentiality reminder." My stomach dropped as I opened it. It was from Apex's legal department. The message accused me of attempting to steal intellectual property and reminded me of the non-compete clause I had signed when I joined. They threatened legal action if I attempted to work on similar security technologies within the next 2 years. I sat frozen, the words blurring on the screen. Jonathan had wasted no time. He was already trying to box me in. The next morning, I showed the email to Maxwell. He read it carefully, then slid it back across his desk. "As expected," he said calmly. "This is their first move. Don't panic. Our legal team has been preparing for this since the night we met." "Preparing?" I asked, still shaken. He nodded. "We anticipated they'd try to intimidate you. But here's the thing. They overplayed their hand. Publicly humiliating you like that, then sending threats immediately after, actually strengthens our case. And as for the non-compete," he tapped the desk with one finger, "it won't hold. They fired you without cause. Judges don't look kindly on companies that destroy reputations and then try to shackle talent." His certainty steadied me, but inside I was still nervous. What if the case dragged on for years? What if investors pulled away from me because of the controversy? "Focus on the work," Maxwell said firmly, almost reading my thoughts. "Build something so strong that their noise becomes irrelevant." So I did. Over the following weeks, our team worked around the clock. We rebuilt Sentinel from the ground up, only this time, we did it better. Rachel strengthened the encryption layers. Marcus used neural networks to make detection faster. Jessica proposed an architectural change that reduced latency by nearly half. Each day, the system became stronger, smarter, more resilient. And each day, I felt myself growing, too. Not just as a developer, but as a leader. Still, Jonathan wasn't quiet. Rumors trickled back to me from former colleagues. Apex was preparing a big reveal at the National Cybersecurity Conference, claiming Jonathan had developed a groundbreaking adaptive system. I knew instantly what he was doing. He was going to present Sentinel as his own. The thought of him standing on that stage, taking credit for my life's work, made my chest tighten with rage. But Maxwell's voice echoed in my head. "Build something so strong their noise becomes irrelevant." So we pushed harder. Late nights blurred into early mornings, coffee cups piled high on our desks. Some nights I slept on the office couch rather than waste time commuting. One night around 2 a.m., Jessica brought me a cup of tea instead of coffee. "Why do you push yourself so hard?" she asked gently. I stared at the code on my screen. "Because this is more than a project. It's proof. Proof that I was never incompetent. Proof that I deserve to be here." Jessica gave me a small smile. "Then let's make sure the proof is undeniable." Her words stayed with me. 3 weeks in, our system surpassed Apex's old metrics. What had taken me 18 months at Apex, we had rebuilt and improved in less than a month with the right support. It was thrilling, but I knew the real test was still ahead. The conference was only 6 weeks away, and Jonathan was waiting. The weeks leading up to the National Cybersecurity Conference felt like a blur of code, caffeine, and tension. Our small team at Grant Ventures worked in shifts, often running 24 hours straight. The hum of servers and the glow of screens became my new reality. Every day we made progress, but every day brought new pressure. Apex wasn't staying quiet. I started hearing whispers through old colleagues. Jonathan was bragging that Apex would unveil a revolutionary system at the conference. He'd rehearsed his speech dozens of times. He had investors lined up, and he was already hinting at government contracts worth hundreds of millions. He spoke as if Sentinel was his birthright. It made my blood boil. Still, I reminded myself of Maxwell's words. Build something so strong their noise becomes irrelevant. One night, about a month before the conference, Maxwell called us into a late meeting. His tone was calm but serious. "Our intelligence confirms Apex has secured a primetime slot," he said, looking around the room. "They'll present first." We're scheduled immediately after the room fell silent. Rachel muttered, "So they get to set the stage." "Exactly," Maxwell said. "They'll try to claim first mover advantage. If their system looks polished enough, it could sway government evaluators before we even begin." My stomach sank. So no matter what we do, we'll be compared directly to them. "Yes," Maxwell replied, "which is exactly why this matters. We don't just need to be good, we need to be undeniable." The weight of his words pressed down on me. For weeks I had been running on adrenaline, but in that moment the stakes crystallized. If Apex convinced the industry that Jonathan had created Sentinel, my career would be over, lawsuit or not. The next morning, I woke up at my desk, stiff from sleeping in my chair. Jessica had left a blanket over my shoulders. A note on my keyboard read, "You're not alone in this. Don't forget that." It made me smile, even through the exhaustion. But Apex didn't let up. 2 weeks before the conference, I received a letter delivered by courier. It was an official cease and desist from Apex's legal team. They accused me of misappropriating proprietary code and warned that presenting any derivative system at the conference would result in immediate litigation. My hands shook as I held the letter. The language was harsh, almost threatening. "Significant financial damages will be pursued." For a moment, panic clawed at my chest. I imagined courtrooms, bankrupting legal fees, headlines painting me as a thief. I carried the letter straight to Maxwell's office. He read it once, then calmly placed it on his desk. "They're bluffing," he said flatly. "If their system was truly original, they wouldn't waste time trying to silence you." "They're afraid." "But what if they—" I started. He cut me off. "Cassie, listen. You documented your work. You published early frameworks in grad school, and every line of code here is time-stamped and authenticated. Their threats are smoke. Focus on the work. That's your best defense." His certainty steadied me again, but the fear lingered. At night, I still lay awake, wondering what Jonathan was planning. One evening, about a week before the conference, Jessica and I stayed late to finalize the authentication module. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "Do you ever think about just walking away?" she asked softly. "Every day," I admitted. But then I remember standing in that restaurant. I remember the way Jonathan looked at me, like I was disposable. And I can't let that be the last chapter of my story. She nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure it isn't." We worked until dawn, fueled by quiet determination. By the final week, our system wasn't just functional. It was outperforming Apex's old benchmarks. We simulated attacks Apex's version would never catch, and ours neutralized them in real time. We pushed Sentinel beyond what I had originally dreamed. And yet, I couldn't shake the image of Jonathan on that stage, smiling as he took credit for my work. The night before the conference, Maxwell gathered us in the lab. "You've built something extraordinary," he said, his voice steady, measured. "Tomorrow isn't just about technology. It's about truth. Let the system speak for itself." After everyone left, I stayed behind, staring at the glowing lines of code on my screen. My hands hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't type. Instead, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, you take it back." The morning of the National Cybersecurity Conference, my stomach was in knots. I had rehearsed our presentation a dozen times, but nothing could quiet the voice in my head whispering, "What if Jonathan wins?" The convention center was packed with industry leaders, journalists, government officials, and investors. The air buzzed with anticipation. Apex's name flashed across massive screens as the keynote countdown began. I sat with my team in the front row, every muscle in my body tense. Maxwell leaned toward me. "Remember, Cassie, truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be undeniable." And then Jonathan walked on stage. He looked polished, as always, perfect suit, rehearsed smile, confident stride. The crowd applauded, and he basked in it. For a moment, watching him command the room, I felt that old pang of doubt. He had the charisma, the money, the reputation. I was just the employee he had humiliated in a restaurant. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jonathan began, his voice booming, "Apex Systems is proud to present the future of cybersecurity. Sentinel." My stomach clenched. He said the name like it had always been his. He launched into a slick demo, using slides I recognized. My slides, rebranded with Apex's logo. He spoke about adaptive learning, contextual detection, and real-time defense, parroting the exact words I had once pitched to him in a quiet meeting room. The crowd murmured with approval. Investors nodded. Officials whispered. It was working. Jonathan finished with a flourish. With Sentinel, Apex is not just leading the market. We're redefining it. He raised his arms as the audience applauded loudly. I gripped the edge of my seat, nails digging into the wood. This was it. The theft of my life's work, broadcast on the biggest stage. And then, it was our turn. "Next, we welcome Grant Ventures," the announcer said. My legs felt heavy as I walked on stage with my team. The lights were blinding, the silence deafening. I forced myself to breathe. "Good morning," I began, my voice shaky at first but growing steadier. "My name is Cassie Miller. Some of you may know me, most of you don't. But you should know this. Innovation doesn't come from titles or corner offices. It comes from people willing to dedicate everything they have to an idea." I clicked the remote, and our Sentinel prototype came alive on the massive screen. Lines of code streamed in real time as simulated attacks began. "We call this system Aegis," I said, deliberately choosing a new name. "Because it doesn't just detect threats, it adapts to them instantly." The room leaned forward as our system neutralized one complex attack after another. Faster, cleaner, more effectively than anything Apex had just shown. Rachel took over briefly to explain the encryption layers. Marcus demonstrated the neural learning. Jessica highlighted the architectural improvements. Each segment showed undeniable proof. This was not Apex's watered-down copy. This was the real vision. And then, I dropped the final piece. I pulled up time-stamped repositories of my original framework. Files dated years before Apex had ever touched Sentinel. My grad school papers. My GitHub commits. My documented prototypes. The audience watched as the evidence stacked up, irrefutable. "Incompetence doesn't create this," I said, my voice steady now. "This is the work of a team that believes in truth, collaboration, and resilience." For a moment, the room was silent. Then applause broke out. Hesitant at first, then louder, building into a roar. I caught a glimpse of Jonathan in the front row. His face was pale, his jaw tight. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked exposed. Afterward, government officials approached Maxwell, eager to discuss partnerships. Investors crowded our booth. Journalists asked for interviews. But the moment that mattered most came quietly. A young woman, maybe 22, approached me after the presentation. She clutched a notebook to her chest. "Ms. Miller," she said softly, "I'm studying computer science. I saw what they said about you online, and I almost gave up. But today, seeing you up there..." Her eyes welled with tears. "You proved that people like us don't have to let others silence us." My throat tightened. I managed a smile and told her, "Don't ever let anyone else define your worth. Not a boss, not a company, no one." That night, when I finally sat alone in my apartment, exhaustion washing over me, I thought back to the restaurant. The humiliation, the shame, the way Jonathan's words had crushed me. And then I thought about the applause at the conference, the young woman's tearful gratitude, my team's smiles. Revenge hadn't been my goal. Recognition hadn't even been the sweetest part. What mattered most was proving, to myself, to others, that dignity and truth could outlast arrogance and lies. I wasn't incompetent. I never had been.